What's up, guys? Um, I just wanted to make this quick tutorial because I've had a few people asking me about how to set up Blender. This is assuming that you've downloaded Blender 3.0. I can post a link in the description, but it's free. I'm pretty sure it's good for Mac, definitely good for PC, Windows. And yeah, when you download Blender, open it up. Um, if you don't have an actual mouse and keyboard, like you're on a laptop, then you can go in here, preferences, and I haven't done this in a while. Yeah, but you can emulate the numpad and you can, you know, emulate the 3-button mouse because that's going to be important. Because, yeah, left click is for selecting and, yeah, just traversing around Blender. Right click is going to pull up a context menu, which is different for different things. But right now we have it in the context menu is for whatever you have selected. So if I click this light and then I right click, it's talking about the light power. But if I select the cube and then right click, now I can shade smooth, and that looks like crap, but yeah, so and then how I'm orbiting around is actually the middle mouse button, like the scroll wheel. So when I click in the scroll wheel and then move around, that's how you orbit. And then if you press shift, well, if you hold shift and middle mouse button, you can pan left and right. And so yeah, this is pretty much just the default view. It doesn't even have materials or anything. I'm making this for one of my friends on Facebook, and I know that he has a GPU, an NVIDIA GPU. So what you can do is here I'm going to the render settings. On this panel right here is all your options for all this different stuff. These are your render settings. I just changed the render engine from Eevee to Cycles. So if I hop back over here, I'm holding shift and then pressing A. Now I can add something to the scene. I'm going to add a plane. I'm going to press S to go into scaling mode, and I'm just moving my mouse to the right. Now I'm clicking to accept. I'm going to press G to grab, and then Z to lock it to the up and down to the Z axis. Z is blue, up and down. X is left and right, the red. Y is back and forth for the green. So I'm just going to Control Z, undo that, put it back where it was. And I'm just going to show you the difference between Cycles and Eevee because it's actually crazy. So if I put this back to Eevee, and then up here, these are your view options. You have wireframe, and you have just your like default like gray shader for everything. This is pretty much for like performance when you have a bunch of stuff in your scene and you're trying to move around. If you go to the full rendered view, like right now, and we're also in Eevee. So if you're doing Eevee, you can pretty much always leave it here and you just move around. But if you want to go to Cycles, see how now it looks all fuzzy. But if you actually render this out, it will look really good because right now we're just doing 1,024 samples, but you can bump that up higher and then it won't be as noisy. I don't know if you can hear my fans just kicked on my computer. So it really helps if you have the GPU to switch this to GPU compute. And now cycles is going to use your computer's GPU to render, and now the fuzziness goes away almost instantly because the GPU is way better at handling all those calculations. So the only thing is that before you can use the GPU, you have to go to your preferences, and then you go to System, and then it'll say Cycles Render Devices. And if you don't have a GPU, it's just going to be none. And then you're just going to have to go over here and do the CPU render. But if you have a GPU, if you have NVIDIA, then you use CUDA. And I think the other one is AMD, or I'm not sure, but the other GPU, you use optics. But I have NVIDIA. I know that my friend on Facebook has NVIDIA. So you're just going to click CUDA, and then you're going to select the GPU, not the CPU. So, and then you, here, I have autosave turned on, so whatever you change, it just saves, so just click out. So at this point, you should have a cube and a plane, and you should be rendering cycles on the GPU. Now, cycles is going to take way longer to render. Like if I switch this to Eevee, and I know I'm jumping around a lot here, but it's a lot of stuff. So here, this goes to the camera view. This is the actual camera. And then if you try to orbit, so if I click the middle mouse button and then orbit, now I just lost the camera view. I have to go back. So what you can do is I like to zoom in first. So I'm scrolling up on the scroll wheel right now. Then I'm going to press N, and I'm going to click, so N is going to pull up this menu right here. Go to this tab, the view tab, and then click lock view, camera to view. And so now when I orbit, the camera is actually tracking. So now this is what the camera is going to see when you render. So we can get like a little moody shot with the backlighting. I just pressed G for grab, Z, Z axis, and we'll just kind of have it hovering right there. So let's say we wanted to actually render this out. You just press F12. If you're on a laptop, I'm not sure if that works, but you can click render and then render image, and it says F12 up there too. So render image. And yeah, that took 0.29 seconds. So Eevee is super quick, but Eevee is not going to look that great. Like this looks like, I mean, it's possible to make Eevee look good. I'm not going to hate on Eevee, but personally, I really prefer like how you get these shadows here, the ambient occlusion. Eevee is a rasterizing engine, so it's pretty much faking a lot of stuff. And if you actually go to Eevee, you have all these options, so you can turn on ambient occlusion, and now you get that nice shadow there. So you can mess with all these settings and make Eevee look a lot better, but I just prefer cycles, and if you have a GPU, I just don't see why you wouldn't be using cycles. So now we have our scene, our camera is locked to the view, and in terms of the render times, yeah. So if we hit F12 and try to render this out in cycles, it's going to give you an estimate up here, and our scene is not that complex, but yeah, that took 8.25 seconds versus 0.29 seconds for Eevee. So that's a pretty big difference. If you're just doing still images, that's not a problem. That's not a huge problem, but if you're going to do animations, it just adds up really quick. You're going to be waiting forever. So there's certain things that you can do. First of all, I'm going to turn off the denoiser because I don't like how it looks personally. I kind of like a little bit of noise. It's almost like a film grain, and it just looks a little bit more raw and a little more photorealistic, but that's just my style. You're going to find your own style and kind of what works for the projects that you're doing. So this menu's annoying me. I'm just going to make sure that I'm in here, not over here with my mouse. Press N, get rid of that dialog box. So how are we going to take the time down? Well, so all these settings, if you uncheck noise threshold, now we're just going to give Blender a straight up number for the samples, and you can also set a time limit. So like it took 8.25 seconds last time. Let's just say I don't want it to take longer than 5 seconds. So now if I hit F12, or if I come up here and do render image, now the time, it might be a little over 5. Yeah, so 5.33. So, and it still looks pretty good. So it's really about finding pretty much the number of samples. The number of samples is going to determine the time to render each frame. So you're pretty much trying to find a balance between the number of samples. Like, what if we just gave it 10 samples? And then if you put the time limit as 0, it'll just run out the samples that you give it. So yeah, so that took 0.42 seconds. So that's on the same order of magnitude as Eevee, but you can see that we get a good amount of noise, like more than I would say is like acceptable for a render. So you could try to turn the denoiser on, and then there's a bunch of options, but I don't really mess with it too much. But let's see what it spits out for us. Yeah, that actually looks pretty good, but when you turn the denoiser on, it goes back up in time because it has to render first and then denoise the render. So you are adding time with the denoiser as well. And so for animations, it just really adds up. So I'm going to take the denoiser off. Let's just put it at like 100 samples for right now. See what that looks like. So yeah, I mean, that looks pretty good. That took 1.6 seconds. So I know that's pretty technical, but now you have your camera locked to view. If you want to get out of the camera view, you can just click this button again. And so now you can set up your scene however you want. Take this light, Shift D is going to duplicate. So when I Shift D, it just got brighter too, because now it's double the light. And I haven't clicked. So once you click, you place it. So I'm just moving my mouse around right now. And we can do the same thing. We can choose to lock it to X. We can choose to lock it to Z. And we can choose to lock it to Y. So like now we're getting very interesting shadows here. I'll press GZ and bring it down. So we have one shadow that's very long and a little more subtle, and then we have a shadow that's more harsh, and then you actually have the area where the shadows are intersecting and they create the harshest shadow. So yeah, cycles is just like, it's really pretty to look at, even like just these basic scenes. So at this point, if we go back to the camera view, we just duplicated the light, and yeah, you can kind of just like find whatever shot you think is cool. So like right there maybe. And so now you can stay out of the camera view, do a bunch of stuff, Shift D, Z, click, Shift D, Z, click, S, move the mouse over to the left, Shift D, Y, click, Shift D, X, click, S to scale, moving my mouse to the right, bring it up. I don't think that's going to be in the camera view. Yeah, all that stuff's way too high. So we can click this one. We can hold Shift, click this one. I'm still holding Shift, click this one. And now it's a good time to talk about this. So we can go to the front view. We can go to the top view. And so that's just going to help you line everything up in your scene. So with the Y view, we're looking at our scene head on. I'm going to press G. And when you're in this view, the orthographic view, if you look up here when I'm moving stuff, you'll see that Y is not changing. G. So yeah, I press G to move, and it's not moving in the Y direction. So you know that you're not messing it up on the Y. It's only X and Z right now. So we can place it on the same level, close to that our original box was at, kind of like here, like just floating. And the plane is still here, but a plane disappears when you're looking at it head on. But if we go to top view, you can see the plane is still here to catch all the reflections. I'm just gonna hit S, move my mouse to scale it up more. And now I'm using the middle mouse wheel to orbit. So yeah, at this point we are rendering in cycles on the GPU. And if I just hit F12 right now, that's what our camera is seeing. And it took under 2 seconds. If you want to save it, you can save it as whatever you want. I'm not going to save this one though. And I think a good just last point for this video is to talk about making an animation, because this is a little annoying. And really what you want to do is all these settings that I'm telling you, you want to make all those changes. And then when you go to preferences, I think pretty much there's a way to set this as the default. Yeah, so you go to File, go to Defaults, and then Save Startup File. So after all these changes that I'm making, you click that, and then that's your default file. So when you go to the camera, it'll move when you move, because otherwise, if you don't lock it and you think like, oh, okay, what if the camera moves a little bit, and then you lose it, and then it just gets really frustrating. So I just lock it there, press N to get rid of that, go to the camera, and so yeah, now we can just set up our render. I'm not going to go into actual keyframing and stuff in this video, but like really basically, you know, let's say that let's go over here to the render settings. This is the resolution. This is just your standard like 1080p resolution, 1920 by 1080, and 24 FPS. I leave it here for cinematic renders because that's generally how movies are actually rendered, and the motion blur and just everything kind of revolves around that FPS. I'm sure there's reasons why you'd want to go higher, but I actually just leave it at 24, and that's going to cut down on your render times too, assuming that you're rendering the same duration of clip. So here, let's just, I set it to 120 because that's a nice chunk. I think it comes out to 5 seconds at 24 FPS, which is a good chunk of time, but you're not going to be waiting forever. So now we need to actually change all these settings, because if we render out the animation right now, it's not going to be an animation. So you click here, you pick a directory. So you know, just wherever. I made a folder for all my animations, so I would name it here. So let's just do test.mp4. I had a glitch one time. I don't know if you have to do this, but I lost a render, and so now I just always make sure that it's called mp4, and then I would click accept. I'm not actually going to save it though, but you click accept, and then that's going to show up right here. And then I have this box ticked for file extensions. So that's going to force it to be an MP4 when you name it MP4. So the first setting you want to change is we're going to go over here from the image to FFmpeg. So now it's rendering a video, but you're not done yet. Go down to encoding, click on MPEG-4. Now if you click render animation, you will get an animation. And then I do perceptually lossless, just so we're not losing a bunch of stuff to like, I think it's the compression. I'm not sure. I just copied these settings from someone else. So leave that there. I think that's good now. So, I mean, really quickly, let's go to the end. I always work backwards for an animation. We can shift click, hit I on the keyboard, and then we can do, for now, well, yeah, let's do location and rotation. So then we'll click this back arrow, and I know I'm kind of jumping around a lot, but this is the keyframe that we just created. And if we click on just this box, you can see the keyframes there, that box, the keyframes there, that box, the keyframes there. So when you shift click and you have all these things and then you press I, you're setting the keyframe for all of those objects. But now we can go back to the beginning of the video, and I'm going to hop out of the camera. So like this is when you'd want to hop out of the camera, because now we can take all these, G for grab, Z for the Z axis, and bring them up. And then let's say, so basically what's going to happen is when we get to frame 120, all these boxes are going to go here. So on frame 1, we'll press I, and well, yeah, we can do it for all of them. So shift click, I, location and rotation. And the only thing is, I think it would just be cool if they kind of staggered. So right now when I move these keyframes, the one on the end is moving as well, which we don't want. So we're going to click off so they're not yellow anymore. And now we click just this one so it's yellow, and we'll put it like halfway through the video. And then this one, click out so you're not doing both, then select this one and we'll do it like 30. And then this one, click out, click it again, and we'll do it at like 15. So I'm pretty sure what's going to happen is these cubes are going to like stagger in to the scene. Yep, so we got 1, 2, 3, and then they're all ending at the same time. You could change the end keyframe so that they all drop at different times too. Just do it like that. So now, and if it's playing really slowly, that's why for cycles you can come back here to just the viewport shading, and then it lets you look at the animation. It'll play out more cleanly. So yeah, now they're falling at different rates and different times. So that's kind of the bare basics of keyframe animation. And we already the keyframes that we selected was location and rotation. So I can actually go here, and this is the keyframe, the first keyframe for this object. So I'm just gonna, it's already on the rotation tool. You can click just the red line and rotate it on X, or just the green line, rotate it on Y, or the blue for Z. Or you can actually just click like in the middle of this, and now you're just like freely rotating it. But I mean, unless you're doing some like free form stuff, it's usually more annoying than it is helpful. So you can also click R and then X to just rotate on X, and you can even do R, Z, and then type out 90 on the keypad, and it doesn't look like anything changed because it's a cube. But if we do R, Y, like 73, yeah, so you can like just specify how it'll rotate. So I'm going to do I again for location and rotation, and now that rotation is saved as well. And then for this one, this is the first keyframe for this box. So I'm just going to rotate it randomly like this. I, location and rotation. And then for the last box, it starts moving here. So I'm going to click this keyframe to make that the active one. And we'll just rotate it like that. And then I, and location rotation. So now we'll have these boxes. They look all chaotic, but when they fall, they're all going to land in place because that's the end keyframes that we set. And I'm pretty sure this camera angle is not great because you can't really see a lot of it. They kind of fall into the frame. So what you can do is, now I'm in the camera view right now. I'm just going to scroll down on the scroll wheel, and now I can see more. So now I can see the boxes from start to finish. So that's just a super basic animation. the last thing I'll cover is this is just the like materials view. It's like look dev view or something. And oh well, I didn't want to scroll there. Yeah, we'll go like right there, and then we'll go out of the camera view. So yeah, here this looks like a little soccer ball. That's the materials options panel, and so it's already been assigned a material, and so we can drag this down, and all these cubes have the same material, but we can change it later. So this is just like the darkness, brightness, you know. So we can drag this over, make them blue, and then if you drag it all the way down, like everything becomes black no matter what color. And then if you go to white, you get the fully saturated color. But I mean, you can also do the saturation here. So, and there's even the little dropper. So if you bring an image in, like you can eyedrop it and get that color. So I'm just gonna mess with a bunch of stuff. Let's make it metallic, have very little roughness, and then we'll do a clear coat and give it some roughness, and let's just make everything pink for right now. And then for the floor, I personally think so if we're on the materials tab, I just click the floor instead of the cubes, and now we have no material. So we'll do new material, and I think a kind of dark gray floor generally looks good, and I think it looks cool when the floor is reflective as well. And so now when we go to the camera view, maybe we'll kind of go like that so we can see all the reflections. Then if we go to cycles, yeah, so now we can see everything all reflecting. And I'm just going to change one more thing. This is the world options tab. You can have your world be any color, and that's just going to, like, you know, project a certain color and a certain brightness. So like now that's like turning the brightness way too much. You can also click here and go to environment texture, and that is going to display what's called an HDRI. I'll just do that for you guys just so you know what I mean, but you can go to a bunch of different sites. Polyhaven is a good one, and it's all free. So like we can just put this sunset in here. It has to be it pretty much has to be an HDRI. Like this one's not technically an HDRI, but it still works because it's a panoramic. And so now the city is like the skybox of this world. So now you get those crazy reflections of the city on the floor. So yeah, like it's just pretty crazy what you can do with this stuff. So let's go back to the beginning and make sure that we can see everything. Yeah, kind of like that. And then you can also set keyframes for the camera. So like if you wanted the camera to orbit around, I'll do that too. So if you click on this tab, that's like the object data properties, and you can click only this to like just keyframe the X location of the camera. So if the camera was gonna only like sweep back and forth, you can just set one keyframe on the X. And you notice when I click it, it shows up over there. Also, you can click and drag to set multiple keyframes and unset multiple key. I guess you have to drag down so you can set them, unset them. Or you can also hover over and press I. And when you press I, it does those for you. So just, you know, instead of individually clicking these, it gets old. So let's press I and press I. And then we'll go to the end. And let's say that we want to kind of like zoom in and kind of hang low right there where we can see the shadows of the cube, the underside. And then you have to make sure to switch the playhead, because if you set a keyframe there, then you overwrote the other keyframe. So now we I on the keyboard right here for the keyframes. And so now after all of that, the camera's moving, the cubes are moving. We have materials on the cubes. We have a skybox, and we have a reflective floor. And this is just barely scratching the surface. Like, we haven't even gone into edit mode yet, but maybe I'll save that for the next video. But basically you can hit tab, and this is like a loop cut tool. So we'll just start going in here, and I'm hitting shift and spacebar at the same time, and then G, and that just lets you click. And then I'm going to press 3 on my keyboard to select only faces. If you press 2, you can select only edges, and if you press 1, you can select just a single vertex, a single vertex. So I'm just going to select some random faces like this. And right click. It doesn't matter where you right click because this object is the active object. And then I'm going to extrude faces along their normals. So it's going to go straight out from where it's facing. And then I'm going to move my mouse. And so now all those faces get extruded. So that's just a taste of edit mode. Now we've totally changed how this looks. So you can, that's how you start to get into actually modeling. But just to recap, we covered how to, well, I mean, you just download Blender. That's how you get Blender. And then how to change your render settings from Eevee to cycles, and how to go to your preferences and animation, or no, system, and change it to your GPU. So once you do that, you're going to be rendering on the GPU. And then this is your materials view, just so you can see what color everything is, but the HDRI doesn't come up. Blender uses its own standard HDRI, just so you can kind of test out the roughness. Like, so when I change the roughness, I can see that there's no reflection. Well, less of a reflection, because I think we have a clear coat. Yeah, so if I make the clear coat roughness 1 and make the roughness 1, yeah, now we get no reflection. So roughness down to 0, clear coat down to 0, and now it's all shiny. And then we actually have our rendered view, well, our pre-rendered view, but this is what it's going to look like. And we got the camera view versus just being in the viewport. You can see the whole scene. So we'll go to the camera, and I've been moving the camera around, but now since we've keyframed it, and if you start to move the playhead, the camera will just like snap back to where it should be. So if I select the camera, you can see that we have keyframes here. So if I move the camera, but then I move the playhead, it's just back. So now you'll never lose where your camera was. So we have the camera set up, we have our objects set up, all the keyframes set up, and the materials with an HDRI. So now we go to render animation, and oh, well, no, I never set this. So yeah, I'll actually do that. So animation library, set that, and we'll just do test render.mp4 accept. And now I can just render animation right here. And this will probably take a while. So yeah, it's actually 2 seconds, almost 3 seconds per frame. So times 120. I'm not good at math, but it's like 5 to 10 minutes. So not too bad. And basically, when that's done rendering, that's weird. Oh wow, Blender just crashed. You know, that's why you got to save your work, folks. That's why you got to save your work, and I do not think I saved. So yep, that's a lesson. That's the last lesson of the video. Always save, especially save before you hit render, because that's when you lose stuff. So I hope that was helpful, at least to get started. And I have other tutorials and playlists on my channel, so you can go check those out, or just comment and ask what you're looking for, and I'll send you a tutorial like specifically about that. So yeah, until next time, you guys. Peace.